What if Julius Caesar wasn't the real villain? For centuries, history has depicted him as the power-hungry tyrant who brought down the Roman Republic. But what if we've been focusing on the wrong culprit? What if the real power grabbers were not Caesar, but the senators seated in the Roman Senate, clinging to their wealth and privilege while the Republic crumbled around them? Far from being the guardians of democracy, the Senate was an elite ruling class that resisted change at every turn. When Caesar rose with reforms that could have saved Rome from its internal decay, the Senate didn't see an opportunity for progress. They saw a threat to their control. Let's rethink the narrative and explore how the Senate's resistance to reform and their desperate grip on power ultimately held the Republic hostage. The Roman Senate loved to present itself as the protector of the Republic, a beacon of democracy in the ancient world. But the truth was far darker. The Senate operated as an oligarchy, dominated by a small group of aristocrats who controlled Rome's political, economic, and military power. While Rome had the appearance of democratic institutions, elections, assemblies, and legal systems, the Senate had learned to manipulate these systems to maintain their dominance. Most Romans, especially the plebeians, had little real influence, and the Senate used its position to enrich itself while ignoring the growing inequalities in society. Time and again, the Senate proved that its priority wasn't democracy, it was preserving its own status. And when leaders like Julius Caesar arose with reforms aimed at helping the common people, the Senate's true agenda became clear: to crush any threat to their privileged way of life, even if it meant sacrificing the Republic itself. By the time Caesar entered the political arena, the Roman Republic was in deep trouble. Economic inequality had spiraled out of control, leaving veterans who had fought in Rome's wars without land or jobs, while ordinary citizens were drowning in debt. Yet the Senate remained indifferent. The Republic was in desperate need of reform, but the Senate repeatedly blocked any attempt to address these issues. The Gracchi Brothers, reform-minded politicians who predated Caesar, had tried to pass laws to redistribute land and provide welfare for the poor. Both were assassinated, one by a mob incited by senators, the other beaten to death in the street. These weren't isolated incidents. They were calculated moves by the Senate to send a clear message: any challenge to their power would be eliminated. It was into this fractured system that Julius Caesar rose to prominence. He wasn't just a military hero who won battles. He was a leader who understood the suffering of the masses and offered real solutions. His proposed reforms included redistributing land to veterans, providing debt relief to struggling citizens, and creating public works programs to generate jobs. These policies weren't radical. They were essential for stabilizing a society in crisis. Yet the Senate didn't see Caesar as a problem solver. They saw him as a threat. His reforms jeopardized their vast land holdings, their financial dominance, and their political control. Instead of addressing the legitimate needs of the people, the Senate branded Caesar a dictator and painted him as the enemy of the Republic. But the truth is, Caesar's rise wasn't the cause of the Republic's downfall. It was a response to a system that had already stopped working. The Senate's claims of defending the Republic and democracy were thinly veiled attempts to protect their own privileges. When Caesar proposed reforms that could have benefited the majority of Romans, the Senate didn't debate or engage. They shut him down. They feared that Caesar's success would expose their incompetence and permanently undermine their grip on power. Their resistance to his ideas was the very definition of a power grab. While they accused Caesar of trying to seize control, they were the ones manipulating the system to maintain their elite status. They weren't defending democracy, they were defending an oligarchy that had enriched them at the expense of everyone else. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, it was a moment that many see as the end of the Republic. But it wasn't that simple. By this point, the Senate had stripped Caesar of his command, blocked his political ambitions, and threatened him with prosecution. They left him no options. He could submit to their will and be destroyed, or he could fight back. His decision to march on Rome wasn't a calculated bid for power, it was an act of survival. The Senate forced Caesar into rebellion, and his march wasn't the destruction of the Republic. It was the inevitable result of a broken system. The irony is striking. While the Senate painted Caesar as a power-hungry tyrant, they were the ones holding the Republic hostage through their inaction and resistance. The Republic wasn't destroyed because Caesar took too much power. It was destroyed because the Senate refused to share it. Their obsession with maintaining the status quo blinded them to the growing unrest in Rome, and their opposition to Caesar's reforms pushed the Republic closer to collapse. Caesar's rise wasn't a symptom of tyranny, it was a symptom of a system that had already failed its people. The Senate, by clinging to their wealth and influence, ignored the voices of the majority and created the conditions for Caesar's ascent. They were the real power grabbers, and their refusal to adapt doomed the Republic. In the end, Julius Caesar wasn't the villain he's often made out to be. The true culprits were the Roman senators, an aristocratic class that resisted reform, ignored the needs of the people, and sacrificed the Republic to preserve their own privileges. While they painted themselves as defenders of democracy, their actions revealed a different truth. Caesar's reforms, though radical to the Senate, were necessary to address the crises facing Rome. The Senate's refusal to accept change and their relentless opposition to redistributing power show that they, not Caesar, were holding the Republic hostage. When we look back at the fall of the Roman Republic, it becomes clear. The Senate's desperation to maintain its grip on power was the true force behind Rome's collapse. If this re-examination of Julius Caesar's role in history made you think twice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the misunderstood moments and figures of the past. Let's continue exploring the stories that shaped our world and uncovering the truths that challenge conventional narratives.